in fact, live on YouTube. So if you're watching this on the replay, you might want to fast forward 1 minute through this, as of course YouTube always likes jacking with people. Not okay. Looks like we are live. So welcome everyone. This is Tim Picciott, the Liberty Advisor, joined with John Snyson, the Economic Truth, and we have Charlie Robinson, who is the author of the new hit book that you guys can find on Amazon. And let me go up there and get that right now: The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. And one of the funny things about this, not that the book's funny, but if you actually scroll down here, it's saying frequently bought together, and it's COVID-19, The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab. So if you guys watched the presentation John and I did on The Great Reset, you'll know all about that. But it's great to have Charlie on. This is episode 26. Charlie is returning champion of the Tim and John show. But actually, I guess technically, and I am stealing that term for Sam Tripoli, the returning champion, but technically, before there was a Tim and John show, we had you on as a guest. So we're calling that, it's like a prequel, I guess. And you were the last of the prequels before we started the Tim and John show. But it was But it was crazy because I was up in Anarchapulco. I think at the time we were talking about the MAGA stocks, Microsoft, Apple.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Apple and Amazon. And it was literally days later that the whole world started melting down and that the S&P 500 then dropped. It was like literally like 4 or 5 days later after that. So a lot's going on between now and then. You guys also might remember Charlie from Union of the Unwanted. He's been on pretty much all of those. But, you know, he's a hard hitter. There's lots of great information. His new book is also co-authored by Jeff Berwick, the Dollar Vigilante. So a lot of you guys know about Jeff Berwick, who also, unfortunately, had to take his YouTube channel down before it
turned transgender, apparently. No.
Yes, he did.
That was hilarious. If you guys haven't seen it, Jeff did a.
It was disturbing.
Jennifer.
My mom told me about it. My mom goes, "You've got to see Jeff's new video." I was like, "Why? What?" And she's like, "He's turned into a woman." And I was like, "Oh, this ought to be good." Yeah, he's out of his mind, but in the best possible way.
Oh yeah, it was really good, but disturbing.
So Charlie, anything going on between the last time we were on the podcast?
No, nothing.
Probably February 16th, 2020. Anything going on in the world that's
nope.
Do you have any stronger convictions? So
we got nothing to talk about. Is it going to be a show?
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your book, or what was the impetus of? I mean, a lot of this audience, obviously, probably is of the mindset that there is a controlled demolition or something is not right. But actually, do you want to start maybe give a little bit about your background? I know you had done some stuff with HGTV and also written some other books as well, The Global Octopus of Control. And do you want to give a little bit of your background, and then we'll kind of get into the new book?
Yeah. My background is in real estate. I've been in real estate for 20 years in Las Vegas. My business partners there were the husband and wife team doing Flip or Flop Vegas. So we were doing general real estate, but we were also having a camera crew follow us around, which is kind of weird. But and we did that for 4 years. And but in my off time, I was writing books, and I wrote a book called The Octopus of Global Control that came out in August of 2017. And about a year after that, I was promoting it on Anarchast, on Jeff's show. And we got done filming our interview, and we were still chatting, but we weren't recording. And he said something along the lines of, it's all coming down, right? It's all coming down. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, like the financial industry is a house of cards, and the money policy and the never ending war, the system is coming down. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, it can't last forever. And we started chatting about that. And he said, we should work on something together. We should write, maybe we should write a book together. And I said, all right, let's think about it. So I wound up in Costa Rica a couple months after that. And I had some time to sort of think about the concept, and that stuck in my head when he was talking about how it's all coming down. And so what we did was we put together this book that sort of showed the comparisons between the way you would take down a high-rise building, like Building 7, and the way you would take down the American empire. So I did a lot of research into how you actually go about physically taking down a building. And we wrote chapters that mimic that. So we've got a rotting foundation, pre-weakening of the building, identifying the support columns, rigging the detonators, who wired the building, ringing the alarm bells, pushing down the plunger, and lastly, clearing the debris. And within each of those 8 sections, we then go into a variety of different topics and in details, and we give some backstory on empires and, you know, empires in the past and how they've gone through these cycles. And what you notice is that, you know, they follow a very, very predictable pattern, and where we are on that circular loop here is that we're at the last stage of it. I mean, all indications are that's where we currently sit in this American empire. It would be nice to pretend like that's not the situation. It'd be nice to be oblivious and pretend that everything was fine, but it's not fine. And we know that. We know it's not fine. And a lot of the, you know, one of the things that these empires had in common was that they were always the last to know that it was coming undone, you know, until it finally happened. And then in retrospect, everyone's like, hey, I mean, what did you think was going to happen? You were overextended militarily. You were debasing your currency. You had bread and circuses. You were debauchery like crazy. Your government was looting the place. I mean, you were starting wars that you could never possibly maintain. You were conquering lands that you had no business being involved in. In common was that all of these things, and there was massive amounts of denial inside the empire by the citizens. They just thought it would go on forever. And that's where we are right now in the American empire. We're in the vast majority of people are in denial about where we are, about how bad things are, and what can be done to save it. So you know Jeff, you guys all obviously know Jeff really well, and he sees the world differently. You know, he's a Canadian guy who lives in Mexico, who's an anarchist, who, when people tell Jeff Berwick, you like anarchy so much, go to Somalia. What does he do? He goes to Somalia. Or you want to talk about hyperinflation of a currency? Well, go to Venezuela. So he goes to Venezuela. You know what I mean? So he's that type of guy. And so he's got a different perspective. Not that I disagree with it, but to be clear, but he's got a different perspective that I can never have. I'm an American living in America, you know, focused on that. And he sees this where he has no allegiance to the United States, and he's more objective than I am. So it was good to put the two of us together and come up with this idea. I think we did it in a way that makes sense to a lot of people. And I think, God, you know, the biggest complaint I have about the book writing process was that I wanted it to come out sooner. I wanted it to come out like in March. And we were, you know, working towards that. And then the Corona situation hit. So then we slammed on the brakes. We waited, you know, 5-6 months, and then incorporated that into the book, which was a good thing that we did that. And now in the end, we released the book on the Friday right before the elections, and the timing of it was perfect. It became a #1 bestseller on Amazon in 72 hours, like on the day of the election, ironically. And so my frustration of the timing of wanting it to come out in March, turns out that I would have been wrong putting it out then. Glad we waited. And so it made it a lot more relevant to incorporate the Corona situation. And you know, and in March, we're talking about the demolition of the American empire. People would go, I can probably see that. But when you put it out the last week of October of 2020, everyone's like, oh yeah, I can definitely see this coming. You know, like they really connected with it. And it's been a trip. We're extremely grateful that people have found the book informative, and I'm humbled by it.
Yeah, you had mentioned that, you know, once you're inside the empire, that, you know, it's always the people that are inside the empire, especially, you know, the crown itself, are always the last ones to know. I mean, what other, you know, kind of parallels did you see as you're writing this book to maybe, you know, the Roman Empire or to other, you know, great empires that we've seen throughout history?
Well, it's funny that
empire is, you know.
Yeah. When we were all at an Acapulco together, and John's got that great book of currency, you know, that all the different bills and everything. One of the things that stood out to me was this concept that I'd never heard of until I was researching the book called coin clipping, where they would take gold and silver coins and they would cut little like pie shaped, you know, clips out of the edges of them all around the coin and collect all those, get it in a pile, melt it down, and make a new coin out of it. So it's like, holy crap, the Romans were debasing their currency before the Federal Reserve was around. You know, like the Fed learned that trick maybe from the Romans. But there's just this temptation when you're an out of control empire to want to manipulate the currency, you know, to have more of it, to find a way to steal more of it, or to, you know, to create more currency out of thin air, which of course is a recipe for disaster, of course, but they have a tendency to do that. So, you know, we see, you know, we see that as a parallel. One of the more damaging things that we see as a potential parallel is a Greek concept called the Thucydides trap, which is that the rise of a new superpower challenges the existing superpower. So they talk about how all these, you know, Sparta and Athens, you know, these great wars that they fought against one another, that as a new superpower arrives on the scene, the existing one is threatened by it. And in 12 out of the 16 instances when this has happened in our recorded history, it's led to war. And we see similarities between the way the United States is demonizing China, the emerging China threat, as they wanted us to believe. And it makes us fearful that a war with China could be inevitable, because the American empire sees China as a threat. And if they follow this line of thinking in the Thucydides
except
trap,
for Joe Biden. Yeah, except for Joe Biden.
Right. Yeah, Joe Biden loves China. But we see this potential conflict, and of course that would be catastrophic. It's always catastrophic when you have a war, but the difference between back then and now is that we have the ability to destroy the whole planet. So it's obviously exponentially more dangerous.
Which sounds like an opportunity for all the psychopaths that are out there. So, you know, in solid part of this Hegelian dialectic is they create the problem, wait for the reaction. They already have the solution. And I mean, it sounds like now that the solution, and you know, say in air quotes, is to have this central bank digital currency. And one thing, I spoke with my grandfather today, and I do want to let people know out there who might feel alone, they might feel like they can't talk to anybody about this stuff. Well, even somebody like myself, and I don't want to speak for, you know,
and me,
Charlie, but as you say this stuff, and even if we're, you know, experts and people that are, you know, a notch above the rest when it comes to deeply understanding this stuff, we're not even prophets in our own village. And my grandpa's like, "Are you mean to tell me that, you know, this stuff can go on intergenerationally, and that Bill Gates is the bad guy, and that, you know, that I shouldn't get the vaccine, and how would they be able to pull any of this stuff off?" And, you know, and it seems like, you know, Charlie, how do they pull this stuff off? How did they do this stuff intergenerationally? And, you know, and what did you learn through your research of how they can really kind of pull the wool over everyone's eyes, or at least obviously not everyone, but, you know, it seems like a large majority of the people right now are just willing to kind of go along to get along right now.
Well, it reminds me of the one of the quotes I put in my first book, The Octopus of Global Control. It talked about Hitler talking about the big lie. You know, that when you tell the lie, make it big, and nobody will possibly consider it that it was a lie. You know, so we part of the way it's kept in secret is that we just can't even wrap our heads around the idea of this monstrous conspiracy. But there are plenty of people that have had a front row seat to this that talk about this gigantic conspiracy. They talk about the octopus, meaning the Standard Oil, Rockefeller interests, and things like that. John Francis Hyland wrote about that. He was the mayor of New York City in 1922, talking about this sprawling octopus with its tentacles into the courthouses and the media and big business. And it's like, this has been around for 100 years. Part of it is it's difficult for people to wrap their heads around, and some of it, especially recently, is that they're provided cover by the media, and the mainstream media will, you know, does two things. They lie in their reporting and say that the world looks one way, and then the second thing that they do is they lie by omission. So they don't talk about the big stories that are, you know, should be talked about.
Like
that's the reason why your
laptop, and, you know,
you got it
on and on and on.
Yeah. And so the reason why your grandpa hasn't heard about this stuff, the reason why most people's grandparents haven't heard about this stuff, is because it's not on the nightly news. And so they make the assumption that they make two assumptions. If it's on the nightly news, it's true, because it wouldn't have gotten on the nightly news if it was just a bunch of lies, which we know that's false. And the second assumption is, if it was really happening, certainly I would hear about it on my nightly news. And because I haven't, therefore it must not have actually happened. And that, of course, is wrong as well. So they're very smart. They're very devious. They understand how to keep things under wraps. And part of the reason why they keep things under wraps if everybody's involved in it, in their group, but the highest levels, if they're all involved in it, they're not really in a position to rat anybody out, for lest they be ratting themselves
out. Especially when it's both political parties, because people are like, oh, well, even Fox News. Well, Fox News is obviously controlled opposition. It's run by Lachlan Murdoch, who's friends with Alexander Soros, George Soros' son, Hillary Bundler, and like, oh, even Fox News said this, and even Fox News called Arizona. And,
right.
Oh, look at this. Republicans even are speaking out against Trump, even though those are basically, basically have two Democratic parties, which, the DNC is more like the Communist Party, and the Republican Party is more like the Communist Light Party, except for when, Republicans get in, except for when Democrat, if Biden ends up actually winning, then the Republican Senate might actually at that point start acting like they care about the budget. But you'd mentioned these institutions get so big, and Hitler, I think the quote was something like, if you tell, the bigger the lie, the easier it is for people to believe, or something like that. Yeah. And it also kind of gets into something that I know Ernest Hancock calls Steigert's law, where that's a law where eventually the institution becomes more important than whatever cause it was initially there to designed to create. So let's think of the Catholic Church, and if you were to start talking about all the pedophilia activity that's going on in the church, well, then that could in turn greatly damage the church. So somebody like the Pope, not this Pope, because I think that's a whole other subject about this Pope, the Black Pope, the last Pope, but but this guy or popes in general, they are incentivized not to blow the whistle on this stuff, because then it could bring down the entire institution. So things like Sandusky with Penn State and all these other big gigantic scandals, it threatens the fabric of society. And so they can't, and they're all criminals together, and their blood's interwoven everywhere, and they've the blood of criminals.
Well, it's like Paul Krugman tweeting about having some kind of child porn on his computer, kind of thing. That's kind of, and that's what they use. Those kind of incentives is what they use. They involve people in that through various sinister organizations, and then they blackmail people with if you come out, you're going to be destroyed, and there's not going to be much left of you. And so that's what that's why you have this massive intermingled circle of influencers around the world that is not going to rat on each other. They're all in on the same crime, and of course by doing that, they're not going to come out, any of them, like whistleblowers, like, oh yeah, this guy did this and that, but then they have some dirt on him, and so on and so on. So these organizations is and of course, like, there's circular organizations that they create. So there's one. It's very hard to find an actual top organization. There's a lot of like side organizations, like the Rockefeller organization. Today I could think of, a big one that's in control of all the central banks currently is the Financial Stability Board, the Group of 30. I could think of, the Rhodes Scholar organizations, and there's, the Council of Foreign Relations. There's so many of them, but these organizations that are, kind of like, they have even intermingled members. But when you go and look at a lot of these organizations, also, they were started by earlier organizations, like, for example, the G30 group, which is a part of, which has all the top central bankers, all the chairs of all the banks and top economists. They were actually started by a guy from the Rockefeller Foundation. And so you actually see, the whole movement. And then I actually learned today, guys, I was listening to the radio in the middle of nowhere. I can't get cell connection, so I was listening to the radio. I actually learned that a guy from the Rockefeller Foundation was the guy that laid the foundation for all the socialism that we have today, all the programs here in Canada. So there you go. It's very, how intriguing how actually these guys are, networking, and they're very, very good at networking with people.
Oh, yeah.
and sort of setting up these networks. I've been a part of, with Deirdre Griffin, with Freedom Force International. So I learned a lot about the structures, and Ed is trying to, structure our organizations. So we are doing the same things in sinister ways to, counteract and fight the other guys that are trying to, put this forward. But it's very interesting because I don't know, like I feel like people feel helpless by not being able to do anything. A lot of people say that, oh, well, we got to fight them at the going into government and into office. But I'm in the booth that we got to make them obsolete. We got to build other systems that suddenly we don't need them anymore. And I'm pretty sure, actually reading a little bit of, in your book there, Charlie, especially the end of it, it's all about the solutions of what we need to, do in order to accomplish getting away from this massive control grid that they created.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the key is to, first of all, acknowledging that we're part of this horrible system. It's not our fault. We've been born into it. It's the way we view the world. And it's tough. It's tough to break out of that. It's tough to break out of it with your currency or the way you think or turning off your mainstream media. I mean, maybe that's not too hard to do, but for a lot of people to break out of this paradigm, and they're thinking, well, if we could only fix this current system that we have. It's like the system was built by people that don't want the same things that you and I want. The system itself is bullshit. The system needs to come down. Like you said, build a different system. And then you'll attract people that way, make them obsolete. That works better than trying to get in and fix their broken system. You're just working on a used car at that point, a used car that's been beat up for the last 100 years with the fuel of fiat currency and been driven around by a maniac with never getting the oil changed, and you're like, why don't I just get a different car? Why don't I just do something different? But it's tough. And you see cryptocurrency coming onto the scene and potentially being a way to break away from that, from the fiat currency trap. And not to say that all cryptocurrencies are created equal. You guys know way more about that than I do, but that's an idea. That's a concept for that, finding a way to get rid of the mainstream corporate media. I mean, if 2020 taught us anything, and I don't think it's breaking news for you, for the three of us, or for anybody listening to this, frankly, but it's that the mainstream media is just totally and utterly full of it. They are not telling you the truth. They are pathological liars. They have an agenda. They don't care. I mean, we're watching riots. We're watching riots on TV, and they're saying peaceful protests. And it's like, do you think that I'm that stupid? And the answer, of course, is yes. They think that we're all that stupid. They do.
Those bricks just happen to be outside of those major areas. Right. It's just a coincidence.
Yes. Just the Acme bricks. I mean, straight out of Roadrunner and Coyote, too. The fact that it was from the Acme brick company. How do we? I mean, we have to take a step back and look around and am I being punked here? Is this a joke? Because it has to be, right? It's impossible for you guys you people in the media to be constantly lying to us about everything, and yet they are, and people are still watching them. So that is confusing to me. But
I think there is some optimism here, and I do want to talk about some solutions, because especially my main man Ernest Hancock has been on this for a very long time. And then, if he was here, we'd have to take a drink. But IPFS, interplanetary file sharing, it's a system where these people are going to wish that they didn't fuck with us, because what's going to happen now is, instead of being on your controlled Facebook or your controlled YouTube or all your other enemy platforms, in the future, and this is definitely not Parler, but in the future, there's going to be platforms that they're not going to be able to censor, they're not going to be able to stop. And then if these social media networks can then embed someone's own individual IPFS server, let's say we each have our own server nodes, and let's say it goes out to all of our fans, and all of a sudden now we've got thousands of different nodes of people who have a little bit of information, and there's incentives to have that information out there, just besides getting the information out there, which would be nice if people would just be nice and do it on their own, like Ernie has done for World Alternative Media. All of our stuff got backed up. All of We Are Change got backed up. All of Derek Bros, Lark and Rose, Press for Truth. Yeah. I mean, basically, he made a hit list of all the people that just got banned, who are over there. But what they're going to be able to do is create a system that they're not going to be able to stop us in the future. But unfortunately, we're going to have to go through a dark period, because the average person doesn't want to hear this. They're not concerned about it.
A dark winter.
They just told you to get on Parler, because that's the the answer to all this stuff. When it's so frustrating when a guy like me, who was arguably the first person on Facebook to call the left fake news and got hammered for doing so on over 99.99% reach reduction on Facebook because of that. Thank you very much. That people just weren't on the ball, and they thought MAGA, and this is going to be a mandate, and it's going to be a red wave, and we don't need to worry about blockchain voting. That's another thing. Not that voting actually matters, but it especially doesn't matter when your vote doesn't even count. And it also especially doesn't matter when your vote technically doesn't count, because you have electors who are the ones who make the vote anyways, and then you get two crappy choices both times. And crappy choice, Donald Trump is much better than Satan Hillary Clinton, and I was willing to give into the system for that one, but then immediately saw. And this really strikes to the heart of everything. Is that did you guys see who? And I think I may have told John this already. But Charlie, did you see who? What's his name? Biden's Federal Reserve governor potential pick is?
Yeah, we talked about that actually. No,
not you, John. I'm asking Charlie, the guest. Have you seen who the potential pick is? No, we were talking Treasury Secretary before. This is Federal Reserve governor.
Federal Reserve governor. I don't know. Lloyd Blankfein?
Jerome fucking Powell, the same person. So I mean, it just goes to show you that Donald Trump picks Jerome Powell and Joe Biden picks Jerome Powell, and I left the Trump train the day he picked Jerome Powell, and all the MAGA people are like, "Oh, you're not smart enough to, Trump definitely knows more than you when it comes to this, and 5D chess." And they picked the same guy.
Biden's playing 5D chess now. We're gonna have W or something coming out, and it's gonna be the Democrat conspiracy. Just wait, guys.
And this is
the banks.
This
the
is
banks
great.
run the world.
Did you see speaking of banks run the world? There was a Yahoo Finance article that came out a couple days ago. I'm gonna get this on screen for you guys who are watching this right now. But it says central bankers seek new role in brave new world. Is literally the title of the Yahoo Finance article. So I mean, these guys don't even go about even trying to hide any of this stuff. I mean, it's just all out there. But I don't know. What do you have to say about any of that?
Dark winter. Yeah, this is to be expected. I mean, Citigroup picked Obama's cabinet.
Larry Summers. I mean, was also the guy that was responsible for getting rid of Glass-Steagall, which separated investment banking from retail banking underneath Clinton. And Bush. Not that I think Bush is a war criminal, but not to defend him, but he got the blame for what ultimately was unraveled under the the
Clinton administration.
Yeah, deregulation during Clinton. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have big problems. I think Bill Clinton is one of the worst presidents in the history of the country, because he did those things. His omnibus crime bill that he put together with Joe Biden put black people in prison on disproportionately long prison stretches for things like crack cocaine,
super predators, actually,
versus powdered cocaine. Yeah, they you'd get a 5 times longer sentence for crack cocaine because it was considered a black drug, which is awful. And super predators, and he was instrumental in the building of the private prison industry. And used that omnibus crime bill to fill the private prisons. He deregulated Wall Street with the ending Glass-Steagall. He got rid of the telecommunications act that allowed all of the consolidation inside the media companies and allowed them to grow from 50 down into just 5, which control all of our news. I mean, Bill Clinton did some really reprehensible things, but we talk about this in the book, where it's like lighting a fuse that has a 25-year long fuse. When you pass the laws, they sound not good, but you don't really see any of it. You don't really see the repercussions of it. It takes kind of a while to play out, like NAFTA. When you're outsourcing all of the factories to other countries, it's going to be bad, but you don't really feel the pain. But now, 25 years later, we feel the pain. I mean, it has gutted the middle class, and these things have catastrophic effects. And so when you talk about pre-weakening the building, as we do in this book, you have to talk about these policies that have been put into place that set this time bomb on the economy, or socially too. And so we have people that are just now getting out of prison on 25-year stretch, 25-year mandatory sentences under Bill Clinton's laws that are just coming out now. Think about that. He passed
and
it
our good friend Kingsley Edwards' dad is still in prison after 26 years and a 60-year sentence for having $500 of coke on him 26 years ago.
It's bullshit.
I mean, so whether or not he's an angel, that's not to be doesn't really matter. But 26 years, and even if you're a conservative, there's nothing conservative about taking my money and using that to jail somebody else. So how about so now the conservatives are communists? So you want to go take my money to go put that person in jail, even though it was Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, sneaking in all the coke into the country, controlling it through the CIA in Mena, Arkansas, and it's so frustrating.
It's so hypocritical too, and we know it. We feel it. We see the hypocrisy hypocrisy. That's the most frustrating thing. It's one thing that the system's rigged against us, but it's like the people that created the system, that put these policies into place, like you're talking about Bill Clinton with the omnibus crime bill and this just targeting a Black community. That is bad enough. The fact that Bill Clinton was instrumental in the bringing in of massive, literally plane loads of cocaine into the country. Oh, the hypocrisy with these people is what makes it so much more frustrating. And people are waking up to it. I mean, I don't know that they're ever going to actually do something about it, but I mean, we have to remember these things. And so the structural flaws in the system have been baked in for a very long time. And some of them happen quickly, but most of them take time to develop. And where we are right now, a lot of the models that these maniacs were running simulations about had 2020 as the starting year for a lot of chaos, and right on schedule, we've got chaos. And I'm not sure that.
Now, do you think that they ramped it up because of Trump? So let's say, because originally I thought, Trump basically threw a gigantic monkey wrench into all their plans, and he wasn't necessarily part of the plan, but that didn't mean that he was a good guy either. He was just a guy to take down, Hillary Clinton and that whole crime regime. But do you think the
but he created a perfect kind of like setup where now he's setting everybody, the people that actually were awake, but weren't awake enough to listen to what we have to say, but they were awake enough that, they knew how corrupt, Clinton and everything was. So they got set up on the one side, and then you have the other side, where the liberals are getting set up as well. So they're just really are just fighting both against each other to create instability in the country. And that's what they want. That's why they have this, whole chaos in the election. Now, my point of view is that would be highly beneficial for them to have an unstable, economy, having people against each other. Because if you divide people, it's so much easier to control the nation that you have set up for yourself.
Yeah, and our premise in this book is that for the people that call themselves the New World Order, not our term for them, their term for themselves. They talk about that all the time. They can't have an existing superpower stand in their way of a one world government. So the empire, the big threats have to go. It started with the Soviet Union back in 91, and they got rid of them in some very similar fashions, dragged them into an unwinnable war in Afghanistan for 10 years. We've doubled that. Had their currency manipulated. People lost all trust in their media, Pravda, which was just notorious propaganda. The criminals inside the government were looting it at an unprecedented rate, and the oligarchs came in and finished off the job. So we're experiencing a lot of the same things that happened in the destabilization of the Soviet Union. And Jeff and I aren't suggesting that America is over, but the American empire is over, much in the way that the Soviet Union lost at Belarus and Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, lost all those satellite countries and just prioritized Mother Russia. That's the same sort of scenario that we could foresee with the American empire. You lose your 1,000 military bases around the world. You get depegged as the world's reserve currency. Your petrodollar scam comes apart. And next thing you know, you've lost the ability to control through the SWIFT banking system policy, through sanctions, through all these dirty tricks that America has been using on the rest of the world to keep them in line and keep them doing the things they want them to do. As our grip loosens, those things go away. And then the priority becomes, all right, well, we have to save the United States and not worry about so much the empire. But that's where we are. And it's hard for people to acknowledge that and to see that. And if Trump is brought in, if Trump was brought in to be the divider, the great divider, then he's played that role to a T. The only thing that could make him an even better divider would be if this voting situation goes through the courts and it swings back to him and he gets reelected.
Well, it has happened before, right?
It has happened before.
Yeah, with Al Gore.
But
and it'd be even better. He'd be even a better actor if he doesn't even know that he's the divider. I think that would be. So I don't necessarily think that he's all part of the plan, but I think they've used him to expedite the plan and be able to sneak things through. Like he snuck in through more gun control than even Obama did. But bump stocks don't matter. So not that I'm saying the bump stocks really matter anyways, but that's not the point. The point is I don't want a single regulation on guns, let alone adding to the gun
No, but that's why you need those events. Look at what happened here in Canada with the Nova Scotia shootings. They just basically banned most of the semi-automatic weapons. and made them, restricted and not ownable. I got a gun license in Canada, and of course they made a whole bunch of guns now illegal to own here in Canada with, the new push. But that happened with a guy that had 2 RCMP cars in his garage that he made himself, apparently. And he was actually caught going to a place where informants for the RCMP usually go. That's the kind of FBI here in Canada, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. But he actually went there to this location and were grabbing cash out of there. And then suddenly he just goes and shoots up 23 people, burns down a whole bunch of houses. We had a gun ban like right after that as, clockwork.
Just like Port Arthur in Tasmania, with that. So they problem, reaction, solution you to death here, and they know where they want to go. They want to restrict your rights, so they create a problem, manufacture the reaction, or the public has the reaction, and then they offer up the solution, and the solution is gun control or banning bump stocks or banning long, high capacity.
Yeah, and it's incremental.
Incremental approach to it, and it works much better there, and then it doesn't have that added detriment of like shocking the system and waking everybody up. If they said today we're going to ban all guns in the United States, it'd be outrage.
Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah,
but they just do it. They do bump stocks first, then they wait a while, then they do the capacity, high capacity clips, then they do something else, then they do shotguns, then they do rifles, then they, it just
it's all the
next thing
guns.
you know, you're
guns matter.
You're the UK where you're stabbing each other. So if they think they're going to stop the violence, then just turn on your BBC News and watch all the stabbings that are going on. I mean, we're violent savages. We're gonna want to kill each other no matter what. We'll find a way to do it. So, but this is the fuckery that goes on at the highest levels of government. These people are smart. I mean, not all the people in government are smart, but the people above them are smart, and they have a strategy, and it works very well. And they use it. They use every tool that they have at their disposal. The mainstream media is a huge component of that. So that's why it's really important for people to turn off their television, or at least if you've got it on, just watch to hear what the narrative is that they're trying to sell you, and then know that you have to do something different. Obviously, if you're watching
whatever they're trying to sell you on is almost always universally bad. I mean, I'd say 99% of the time it's bad, and so, or they're gonna, and like Fox News, for instance, I've always thought they were the most dangerous because MSNBC is obviously full of crap, CNN obviously full of crap and everything, ABC, obviously they're all full of crap, but Fox News, for a lot of Republicans and people that kind of get, a lot of what we're saying, obviously not all of it, but they think, oh man, look at this. And then at the last second, they Judas goat you to the wrong conclusion. And it's sort of like what Google does is they know what you're thinking because they have the aggregate of all the basically knowledge that there is. They see where humanity is going, and then they're able to kind of, steer that ship, a few degrees to get them in a different direction. And then the other, I think, main thing that they use is it's sort of like in Bond when you've got two different piranhas fighting each other, and so the people at the top look at the left and right as the two piranhas fighting each other. They wait till the piranhas are both weakened, and they swoop in with their solution, which is always to give them more power, enrich them. They don't care if it's socialism or communism or fascism or any ism,
as long as it's an ism.
Because at the very top, it's a few people controlling everything, and it never works out well for anybody, especially gays and minorities and the same people that are clamoring for all this government central control, while at the same time saying Trump is Hitler, but we should give up our guns to Trump. And so because we only want Hitler to have the guns, in this type of example, and so it's so crazy, it's so ludicrous. And it's just, at what point are people going to realize? Because the same people who are clamoring for this stuff, they're the first ones usually to go. Like just look at several different examples of countries where the currency collapsed, and it seems like we were on a one. Now, Charlie, what do you think is going to be the first kind of leg to drop? When we know that the controlled demolition is real. I mean, obviously we're probably well underway right now, but do you think it's going to be the currency is going to be the big thing, or do you see war is going to be first, and then that way they can blame the currency drop on the war and not like the systemic problems that were there all along? Yeah, well, I think I thought Deutsche Bank was actually going to be the first domino. I thought that, in terms of from a financial component, it still might be, but Deutsche Bank. Who's that? Have we ever talked about Deutsche Bank, John?
Well, BaFin is propping them up, though. That's the problem in the German government. Like BaFin being the Securities and Exchange Commission, just in Germany. Yeah, so they're not going to let it go by first. They're going to do whatever it takes.
Yeah, that's that contagion where everything is connected to one another. Where if a Deutsche Bank or Chase or whatever you pick the bank, Citigroup goes under, it doesn't just affect them; it affects everybody else. They're all holding each other's derivatives, and they're all interconnected. I mean, if one goes, theoretically they could pull each other all down. Although it didn't happen that way in 2008 with Lehman Brothers, but it very well could because of the derivative component of it now. But the coronavirus situation stepped in and offered them the perfect cover for all of this. Now, anything that happens can be blamed on that. An inanimate, like a faceless object that it's not anybody, you can't blame anybody. It's just nature. It's just, bad luck. We got this virus and it killed
bat
people
in Wuhan.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Chinese. It's the Chinese fault. Then that's you see that demonization of China. So it's the perfect cover story because now the banks aren't going to get blamed for their role in screwing up the economy, which they were well on their way of blowing up before this Corona situation hit.
Oh yeah.
But now so a couple things happen. First of all, it's the perfect cover story to blame everything that you've ever done wrong on this Corona situation. That's it. But then
Chicago bonds can be bailed out, and like they were, the Chicago pension system was 23% funded, a year and a half ago, but now it's because of COVID that we need to go do something.
Yeah. So they're going to use that, and then it also is the perfect new excuse for all these psychopaths in government to roll out any sort of crazy dystopian idea they had before that would never be accepted or get passed. Now they take a look at it again and see if they can spin that in a way to incorporate virus protection in it, or we have to do this or else the virus will get us. And so now they have a whole new avenue of ways to lie to you and introduce and roll out some new programs. Like as a prime example, contact tracing. Mm-hmm. Think that we would have accepted that in February when we were all in Mexico and they said, well, we have to have contact tracing before you get on this plane. Get the fuck out of here with that. I'm not doing that. Yeah. But now it's going to be rolled out. And who negotiated the deal with Congress a summer before that? Bill Gates did. $100 billion contact tracing deal that he negotiated in the summer of 2019. What a coincidence. It's almost like he knew it was coming, right? So they've got this setup where they can now at least reconsider all of their worst dystopian dreams that they had for how to enslave humanity and go
cashless, right?
Yeah, cashless society for sure. Universal basic income. Oh, well, now we have the excuse to roll it out. Fed coin or whatever. I mean, it's all coming, and the tech component of it is probably the most dangerous too, because we're all like, we're having this great conversation on Zoom and we're able to connect, and so. Technology, isn't it a great thing?
And they've taken down people's Zoom meetings before. There was some professor that someone didn't like because they were more, and I think they were trying to expose some of the contact tracing or the coronavirus stuff, and they just shut him down. And that brings it to another point that my grandpa made today. He's like, Timmy, are you honestly saying that there's monetary things has to do with the coronavirus? Because that's just completely crazy. He's like, what is the Fed and what is all these digital currencies talking about? What does that have to do with the coronavirus?
Hey, who wrote that back in 2016? The Curse of Cash. Kenneth Rogoff. He had a big chapter on bacterias and viruses spreading through cash. Well, there was his agenda, just came into fruition very fast. They were very fast out to try to scare people to use cash. Like in a lot of stores here in Canada, you have it's like we would highly prefer if you use a credit card or a debit card if you care about other people, but you can still give your like here we have an Air Miles card for rewards points. You could still give that to the cashier, but.
You've been sticking your dirty credit card and all these other slots. So what's the difference? You know what I mean? It's like they come up with the agenda
Yeah.
And then they work backwards to figure out how to do it. So it's like the agenda is like the World Economic Forum Great Reset agenda, you know, cashless society, universal basic income, AI, self-driving cars, mandatory vaccines, contact tracing, all this stuff. Okay, these are the things we want to do. How do we do it? Okay, well, for UBI or for cashless society, we have to make people scared of cash. How do we do that? We talk about viruses on cash. Okay, good. So they just come up with these, they're trying to get to from A to Z, and then they just work their way backwards and figure it out one by one. But with the Corona situation, it gave them, it opened up this option, a sea of possibilities to them in a variety of different industries. So they could tackle, you know, you would think it would only be medical related, but it's not. It's technology. It's banking is involved in this. Transportation is involved in it. You know, smart cities are involved. I mean, they're every kind of component of the world economic, well, society in general is now being viewed again through the lens of coronavirus. And so, so it is in a sense the perfect storm. And let's remember that we might have not been paying attention about this in 2017. I know I wasn't, but Fauci said in 2017 that Donald Trump was going to be experiencing a pandemic during his presidency. It's almost like, once again, it's almost like they knew it was coming. Wow, what a surprise, you know?
Well, I went to a one. You know,
Event 201, yeah.
And if Bill Gates knew all this shit was coming, how come he didn't already have the CDC, you know, stockpiling masks and warning people, hey, you know, you should at least have, you know, this much food or this much mask, or I guess in hindsight having some toilet paper. I mean, what did he do besides trying to make different plays to make a bunch of money off of this? Did he actually do to try to prevent this other than, you know, and he's also like the perfect guy because everyone thinks that like the enemy is going to be this, you know, some guy like Hitler or Napoleon or someone, you know, riding in a white horse, but they want to have these geeks, you know, wearing purple socks and rainbow colored this and talking really effeminate because it gets people's guards down. They're like, oh, that guy's just some nerd and we're not going to have to worry about him when it's these people who are the most dangerous because they're trying to cloak themselves. Like a guy like Tim Cook, for instance. Oh, he's just, you know, a really nice, you know, gay guy that runs Apple. When meanwhile, that guy's like one of the most ruthless guys there is. And then they have this whole like green, liberal, trendy, you know, appeal to them. But they're anything but green. They're anything but liberal. And they're one of the most, you know, ruthless, cutthroat, capitalist companies that are out there. Sorry, John.
Yeah, no, I look at the security industry. I work in the security industry. And what the big push is now that they're trying to get everybody to use, it came out in I think it was around April. It came out. They launched a massive lineup of thermal cameras. So now you're gonna potentially see, like, when you have all the stadiums and everywhere, airports, everything reopen up, and they're gonna have thermal cameras on top of the metal detectors. That is equipment that they have. And then, of course, there's a ton of thermal cameras that won't even allow you to get into the office. It would just be like, oh, you can't have access into getting into even the building if you have a too high temperature. So that is what's coming. That's what they're actually pushing out to the salespeople, trying to get this going. Because remember back in, you know, you were talking about the planned demolition. Look at what came out through the security industry in 2001. They just had, you know, naked body scanners, metal, everything just came out right away. And that's what you have again now, where they also have facial recognition and all this stuff coming into fruition, where they're trying to bring it and you know, like kind of slowly push it onto the Western public through you know, different systems that I look at, and they are doing, you know, pieces on, you know, how great it could be to have, you know, facial recognition cameras in schools and in public places and so on. This is really getting pushed hard now, and of course it is. You know, very, like, especially with the thermal cameras and then, you know, all the algorithms attached to it, they're really like trying to push that with, you know, of course, COVID. It's, you know, another great way of doing it.
Well, and I was in China, in Shanghai in 2005. And I was traveling I'd been there for a week, and I was traveling from Shanghai to Hong Kong with this group of people. We were on a work trip. And we were in the airport in Shanghai, and I didn't feel good. The night before, I just was, I don't know if it was food poisoning or whatever. I just didn't feel good, but we had to make the trip. I was good enough to I could deal with it, you know? So we're going down this hallway it's like sort of like I don't know if it was, if we had already gone through security or not, I can't remember, but it kind of funneled you down into like this main, you know, like a bigger, wider hallway, kind of narrowed you down, and you had to go through this turnstile. and they had these big kind of like satellite dishes, you know, those heaters. You ever get a heater and it's like round and you plug it in and it glows red, and they had two of those on either side, and I was like, what is this? And as I got closer, I could see that it was thermal cameras, and they were scanning everybody to see if anybody had a fever because it was bird flu that they were going through there. And I was like, oh shit. At first thing that goes through my head is total recall, of course. I was like, 2 weeks, you're trying to get through this thing, and they're all looking at you. And I was like, shit, man, I'm going to have to, go total recall, wrap a wet towel around my head so I can get through this. And I thought they're going to put me in like quarantine me for 3 weeks to make sure I don't have bird flu or anything. So that technology in China was there 15 years ago when I was there. I made it through. I was fine. I don't know if it worked very well back then or not. I certainly had a fever, but that's what they were doing. And when you walk through, I could see on the monitor, we were all glowing like Predator,
Yeah, exactly.
It's scary. So that's definitely the way they want to take us. And unfortunately we in the West, the maniacs running our system here are looking at China, their dystopian social credit system model that they're rolling out. And instead of being horrified by it, they're going, I like what you guys have done here. Let's see if we can export it to the United States. Because at their core, they want control over all of us. Monetary control, physical control. I wrote about all these control mechanisms in my octopus book, 8 different types of control. They want 360-degree control around us at all times. So what are we going to do? Are we going to take it? I mean, we know that it's coming. We see it rolling out. It's just a matter of, are we going to just passively accept it, or are we going to draw a line in the sand and stand up and do something about it?
Yeah, look at Norway. I just recently posted an article from Norway that it was a Russian girl that came in from Russia. In Norway now, you have to have 10 days of quarantining, and you have to prove that when you get there, you get a test. But where they put people, they put them in a hotel without a fridge, without nothing to cook or anything on. And so they're stuck there. And actually what happens is the police comes to the gate and then follows you all the way to the hotel to quarantine you in Norway. So, the dystopianness, and of course, Norway is not the best place. I moved away from Norway. Norway's put up as another thing that, is up on a pedestal as social heaven. But Norway has, severe issues with mass amounts of debt, huge dependency on oil and all these problems, and a very totalitarian government, that have full control over how much money you make almost at any time. But interesting enough, though, what happens when you put in those really heavy control measures? Norway is also number 4 in the world of a black market workforce. So there you see, as soon as you put in those heavy control measures, it's like we're talking about currencies failing. Back in Zimbabwe in 2008, they put in heavy, they made gold and silver illegal by death if you used it in a transaction, but everybody used it. Because who would take a worthless, dollar, the Zimbabwean dollar, because it was so bad. It started when they put out the $100 trillion Zimbabwe bill. The first time it came out, it bought you 2 for a bear. Well, about 2 weeks later, it bought you 2 bears. So who would actually accept that? But they made it illegal by death if you used another medium of exchange. Meanwhile, they never learn it. And I think that this is going to be control measures being put out. But I think the way we're going to actually get away with it, and it was also in your book, is that stop, doing things, stop participating in the systems, create your own separate entities that you could actually work around these measures. Because if you don't, that control grid is going to enslave you and put you in prison forever. Like, look at what they've done in China with, all religions, for example. Don't like or hate religions, but in China, they came after, the Buddhists, they came after the Christians, they came after the Muslims, Uyghur Muslims up in the southwest, northwest there. Yeah, they're actually, you know,
You
putting
probably
in
could have just
German
made up
caps.
anything and nobody would have known what
Yeah.
it was.
You know, exactly. No, it's interesting. So you have all these measures, and now, of course, like everybody seems to be very loving of China and how they've done, but especially with the One Belt One Road. But what's interesting though is China is using a very similar tactique used by the International Monetary Fund, and it's used through the AIIB, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is just basically borrowing money to, you know, corrupt countries, creating. But actually, they're smart though, because they've created a little bit of infrastructure for the people, and then of course they take other infrastructure as collateral, and when they can't pay, they take that. You know, in Zambia recently, they took, you know, the biggest hydro dam, and they took the airport as collateral that they couldn't pay their loan. So they're using all these measures. You know, it's like a loan shark going out and borrowing money to somebody that they know can't pay it, and then they just strip you of all assets that you own. So they just do these measures, and there's no control. That the only way you could stop these guys is by not participating. Basically, I think that's their only way out, and I think that's what your book is, mentioning at the end is like if we do, you know, we can complain as much as we want on these systems, but if we do still participate in those systems heavily, you know, we're enabling them.
Yeah. And I was inspired to write my first book because of John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And he talks about how the IMF and World Bank go around making these loans to countries like Ecuador to get them to build a hydroelectric power plant that they know isn't going to pencil out. And they agree to it and they build this thing, they fall behind on their payments. And then like a loan shark, they go to Ecuador and they say, you owe us a bunch of money. You can't pay it, but we'll work it out. We'll let you, you know, sell off your ports to our buddies or privatize your lumber industry or vote our way in a UN resolution or put a U.S. military base. There's some shitty deal.
Yeah, I sorry to interrupt you. I got one other thing. You know, remember how the leaker, Julian Assange got put in prison? Well, guess what happened a week before he was taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy? Well, Ecuador got a massive IMF loan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like they paid him off. It's like they bought him. Yeah, that's what they do. So that woke me up to the scam of using. So I'd always believed, or I'd always thought that the only way that you could take over other countries was through force. And what I realized after reading Perkins' book is that you can do it through debt as well. In fact, it's bloodless if you do it that. I mean, it's still painful, but you can enslave a country. You can take over a country in a soft coup that way, where you control them in a way. They fall into debt with you, and then they have to do what you say, or else you put the screws to them, or you invade them. You know,
or you fund rebel groups. Like, for example, I just recently, was it last week? Yeah, last week I talked to a guy. He's an entrepreneur here from that lives in Winnipeg. But what is interesting, he is from El Salvador. And there, of course, they had the Iran-Contra, and he remembered as a little kid, you know, seeing the U.S. military and everybody coming in. Actually, was telling me about how his grandfather was taken to CIA bases and then get trained and then, you know, shipped back again into the country. So, you know, it's very clear that they use these tactics in order to then, you know, stir up stuff. And then, you know, if the rebellions or something doesn't happen, you know, then they suddenly, you know, you die in an airplane or something like that.
Yep. And that's what Perkins wrote about. Jaime Roldos and General Trujillo both blew up in airplanes after rejecting they say first Perkins comes in to do the negotiating.
Yeah, the Bike Club.
If you don't go for it, then they threaten a regime change operation. Then the jackals come in. That's what he called them. And when that happens, you get on an airplane and your airplane blows up. And in fact, both of those guys blew up within 3 months of each other. So
I mean, it happened to like one of the senators or one of the people out of Alaska who was criticizing stuff. I know even that the one lady who certified that Obama was born in I really do think he was born in Hawaii, and that was a smokescreen for something else. But that's a whole nother topic. But anyways, yeah, the lady that certified it, then she mysteriously died in a plane crash, with the only person that died in a plane crash. And then and it also gets back to the creator of the Federal Reserve System. Paul Warburg said, we shall have a one world government. It's only a matter through consent or conquest. And what they realize is it's better to get people to beg for it than it is to jam it down their throats. So if you make 30 million people unemployed, you're getting everyone who's, at the hand of the government teeth that needs, all this subsistence just to get by now. And they're struggling and they're in a lot of, pain, economically and, basically just all the way around. And they're going to beg for help. And the help comes from the government. And so it's like what Harry Brown says, the government's someone that, breaks your legs and give you a crutch. So the government makes all these people unemployed, F's everything up. And then people are now saying, oh, we need to do something. Well, that something is, oh, we've got we can't give out cash because that's bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a central bank, Fed dollar, which actually the first $1,200 payment was supposed to be through a Fed dollar. And then that's going to go onto an app on your phone. You can just download it. And we saw in China and Shenzhen just like a couple weeks ago, they had some sort of scheme where for the opportunity to win $30, which I guess over there.
It was genius. It was genius though when you think about the implementation of it. Tim, one other thing came to my mind when we talked about Obama and so on. I don't know if you guys knew, but a little minion of someone over here, best buddy of Justin Trudeau, that tried to infiltrate my party, actually did so and destroyed my party. He was telling me how he was very proud about this, that the Obama campaign was brought over to Canada to run Trudeau's campaign, and what changed? It went from change.
Trudeau take his blackface off? I mean, is that what changed?
No, it went from change to real change. That was the two different slogans. And of course, you just see how these guys are intermingling, on a global basis. And of course,
he probably got paid like $5 million for that, like market research analysis. All right, we're gonna add the word "real" in front of change. All right, that'll be.
Well, you know what's funny? The two guys that have screwed up the Canadian economy completely. It was Pierre Trudeau, his dad, and then now Justin Trudeau. They were the ones that implemented extreme amounts of debts. Like it's just beyond comprehension. Like we increased the Canadian debt here. With 300%, with 60%, just in 6 months, and so what's interesting is also what they did here in Canada is that they paid out $600 million in a bailout to mainstream media outlets, and they actually created a list of trusted media here in Canada. Of course, me and Josh weren't on that list.
What a surprise.
Yeah, it's a shock. Now, one thing I did want to bring up to Charlie, and we see like this dystopic world that we're entering right now is, and I'm sure you probably saw this, but Ticketmaster / Live Nation the other day said to get into one of their concerts, you're going to have an app on your phone that then somehow proves that within the last 3 days you had a coronavirus negative test in order to get into a concert or a sporting event. And
wasn't it a vaccine though?
Yeah, but no, it was about, this one was specifically about a negative test result, but I'm sure a vaccine would be a part of that as well. Just that's not out yet. But do you think that that's something that you see? What do you think the odds of something like that getting implemented, or do you think that people might rebel at that point, or people might say, hell with it, I'm not going to the concert, and then we get to see, Hollywood and all these singers and all these sports stars maybe start losing money, and then maybe things changing, or what's sort of your outlook or analysis on, where things are going with this?
Yeah, I'll have to talk to some of my friends about that, because I have friends that are, vice presidents at these companies, Live Nation, Ticketmaster, AEG. I'll have to talk to them about that. Look, this is an easy one for me. If everybody just collectively says, we're not doing that, they'll change the policy. That is something that is, if somebody asked me, I have to prove that I had a vaccine or had a negative test before I get in their sporting event or their concert, I won't go. Period. End of story. I won't spend money. I won't go. And frankly, if it's Ticketmaster that's doing that, I'll never use them again. I just won't.
I'm looking right now. It looks like they've already lost $7 billion of revenue this year, which, we're not shedding any tears over here for that. I know certainly John and I aren't. I know you aren't either.
No, this is if they want to, I get it. They're probably coming at this from a business standpoint, which is, how do we get people to feel comfortable going to be in a large group of people and stand next to total strangers for a 2-hour concert
or
a 3-hour
cough
event
that we just detected? I mean, now that we have what is different, Siri and stuff want to be able to detect whether or not your cough was a coronavirus cough. That's, another thing that's going on now.
It's preposterous.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like cue the circus music. This is where we are with it's insanity. And the problem is there aren't enough people calling it out for what it is, which is a collective delusion that we're not all dying from coronavirus. This is nuts. This is nonsense. But the corporations are now stuck because even though this isn't they've created this false reality, the corporations now have to function in this false reality. So it doesn't even matter whether it's true or not. There's enough people that think it's true. So now they're like forced to deal with it. They're forced to like try and, like Ticketmaster could come out and say, all this stuff is nonsense. You guys are worrying about something that has a 99.74% survival rate and a median death age of 80. What are we worried about? What are we talking about? If you're old and sick, stay home. The rest of you people come on. If they did that, of course, they would be right to do that, but there's a huge percentage of the population.
I'm reading this article right now. It says
you're mortified.
The Ticketmaster digital app, third-party health information companies like Clear Health Pass, which I imagine is probably associated with the Clear Pass, going through, the airport,
DHS.
Or IBM's digital health pass, which we know, IBM's entire corruption and how they were basically, started to help categorize the Jews back in, World War II. Testing and vaccines, and also LabCorp and CVS Minute Clinic. So we've got ClearPass, IBM, and certainly, IBM, Dr. Thomas Watson gave all of his money when he died to the Nazis. Hitler gave him a special award, sort of like our Medal of Freedom, that it was called, I think, the Double Iron Eagle Cross or something like that. Like the highest award someone could be bestowed upon in Germany. And now, if you need to get something done through a smart computer at the VA system, it's called the Watson computer, that's named after a eugenicist that, gave his money to Hitler and was like literally, and then Bill Gates' mom then was on the board of IBM, which is very rare for a woman, in 1978. And then after he stole his technology from Gary Kurtall, then IBM is the one who basically made Bill Gates where it is, where, so it all comes back around to IBM and Bill Gates and,
America!
America.
Yeah. Yay, America. We're winning. But try having this conversation with somebody that watches CNN. You can't do it. Their brains will explode. They'll just be like, you're a conspiracy theorist. None of this stuff is true. If clearly I would have heard about it on my nightly news. And since I didn't, it must not be true. And Bill Gates can't be this bad and take the vaccine and get on the cattle car and be resettled in the East. We're gullible. We're a bunch of sheep, not us, but as a population, we do the bare minimum amount of thinking. We outsource our critical thinking to the mainstream media, act surprised when it backfires on us. You're trusting Fauci and Bill Gates and Birx and in the CDC, like
people that all have a financial vested interest in this. And then, did you see Biden's new COVID advisor? Let's look at this on the screen for people. Biden COVID advisor says U.S. lockdown of 4 to 6 weeks could control pandemic and revive economy. Is this sort of like the 15 days that I don't even know what day we're on now. Someone told me today, like 285 or something like that, of being on this 15-day lockdown. But how far do you see them pushing it? Do you see Biden coming out with a national mask mandate, or do you think that he's smart enough to realize that would actually push back?
No, he didn't care. He didn't give a shit. He's already the president. Fuck
he already
you
stays
guys.
Inside anyway. So
he's not going to. I have to really give these people what they voted for. Dude, they didn't vote for you. They voted against Trump. You just happen to be the person that they voted for because you weren't Trump. Don't pretend
people,
like everyone was,
because there was name recognition with Biden because you were there for the first half black president in Obama.
Exactly. Yeah, but those 12 people at your rallies, I'm sure they're very enthusiastic about your mask mandate. This is part of the globalist agenda. It's to destroy. It's part of the fourth industrial revolution.
They probably actually are excited about the mask mandate. The 12 people at his.
They probably are, and a lot of people are that are into their masks. They see that as like as a sign that they're doing the right. They're doing something, but they're doing the right thing. They're protecting. They don't want to kill grandma, and I'm helping. And look, for the vast majority of people, they think they're doing something to help humanity. I get that.
Well, and people actually says now though that I talked to someone that believes that it's manslaughter when you actually give COVID to somebody that died. So that's how far they come with the whole propaganda mechanism. You never heard about this with any other disease that have existed. And another thing that came out in March, it was IATA, which is the International Aviation and Transportation Agency, came out with the suggestion of immunization passports, and that was on March 21st of this year. So they were way ahead of time of where we were at with the whole COVID crisis, of course. So they knew this. But interesting enough, what is IATA? Well, it's a branch of the United Nations global government.
What a surprise.
Yeah.
There's the United Nations again.
Yeah.
If people don't fit it, David Icke put out a book called Dot Connector, and this is what it is. There, we look around, we find a lot of dots. And when you start connecting them, it paints a picture. And the picture that it paints is that these globalist organizations, these think tanks and NGOs and groups like the United Nations and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Atlantic Council, all these groups, they are trying to put pieces in place to create a one world government, with them in charge and all of us down on the reservation stuck there. And that's why things like health passports come out 2 weeks after the coronavirus situation hits the US, and everyone's like, wow, what a surprise that they're talking about global passports and things like that. You think that stuff wasn't on the drawing board for years in advance? Of course it was. And that's the reason why Fauci talked about this in 2017. It's an agenda. It's a plan. It was made to happen. And the things that happen in the wake of it, just look back at 9/11. Look at how the Patriot Act was rolled out immediately afterwards. It's like they just dusted it off. It was sitting in somebody's desk
like tens of thousands of pages, suddenly just comes into
magically
person.
Came together. Yeah. It's almost like they knew it was coming. Gee, what a surprise. This is the same thing. And so but if you have this conversation with somebody that doesn't understand the backstory, it's tough to get anywhere with them because they just reflexively think that you're a conspiracy theorist for that. But it's like,
well, yeah, they've been told to though. Like, how can you blame them? They've been manipulated through media in such a long time.
Sure.
It's interesting. When I'm stuck at these hotels, there's not much else that venture media to look at, and I do look at it just for some entertainment value. And it's just interesting the amount of propaganda that are coming out that they're spewing is just beyond ridiculous. Like how, heavy they are on the propaganda mechanism. Here in Canada now for over a month, we had the medical elites, being out there calling for mass lockdowns. Meanwhile, the conservative government here was very careful because they were scared that, they're going to screw up the economy again because we had a shutdown from March to June here. And now, of course, we just entered back into one because of the mass amounts of, screaming that, like the whole healthcare system is, we don't have any more beds to take care of people. Meanwhile, they had the former head of healthcare in the province come on CTV, which is Canada Television here in Canada. It's one of the news channels that are certified by the government. He came out and actually said that, he's like, I don't know if you're the viewers here that might be interested in some facts here that I want to give to them. And then he starts saying that basically where we're at is we're at a regular or even lesser flu season. That was of course pre the craziness that we entered into now. But he was actually that video was deleted. Somebody actually saved it and then uploaded it on BitChute, which is great, but it got deleted. You can't find it, that interview. And that was the former head of health of Manitoba. You would think that he would have, a little bit to say, but apparently not.
Yeah.
It didn't fit the agenda, right? So.
Yeah, and if it doesn't fit the agenda, it gets silenced, you get deplatformed, you get marginalized and called crazy and things like that. But if it fits the agenda, then you get propped up and you get to the front of the line. You become, they make you a star like Bill Gates or Fauci or, you know, these guys that nobody did a background check on these people. They didn't ask for their qualifications. I mean, the gay community knows who Fauci is. They want that guy hung for what he did to them with AZT back in the 80s. I mean, they're no fan of his. So there's manipulation going on, and it's frustrating to me on a bunch of levels. But the most frustrating thing is just the people, the general public that just are some of them are busy and they don't have the time to figure this out. I get it. Some of them are just content in their ignorance and just happy to not know anything, and they don't want to get involved, and they're willing to just take it, you know, and this has been 2020 has been a gigantic psychological operation. It is meant to destabilize us. It's forced us to fight with one another. We're divided on where we should go from a health standpoint. We're undecided on society. You know, how do we navigate?
Shut down social activity, right, with family and friends. You know, it's been extremely devastating. And when you look at the implications that it had on people's mental health, it's just substantial. You know, suicides are through the roof, overdoses are through the roof here in most of the provinces here, because what they did is they took people basically that lost their job. They gave them what's called CERB, which was better than minimum income here in Canada, and suddenly you had a massive uptick in overdoses because people had a lot more money. You know, the devastation, you know, how about we, would shut down the world until we actually get a hold of this 9 million people a year dying of starvation.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't pay though.
No,
they can't.
Speaking of which, you saw that. We got the author of the death panels, Rahm Emanuel's older brother, who is now part of this, coronavirus task force. So you got a guy who said that people shouldn't even live past the age of 75, now wanting to, dictate our health, which he's already. And then people are like, oh, well, the hospitals are at capacity. Well, yeah, government basically run hospitals with government run healthcare systems, which is actually more of a fascist system than it is socialist. Why, if it was done in the private market and it wasn't this whole, Rockefeller type medicine?
But what happened with the military hospitals that they rolled out there? Remember in New York,
empty.
There was nobody there. They did in Alberta. They had it. There was. They actually did a whole news story on how they transferred one person over to this massive, gigantic military hospital in Alberta, Canada. And you see just this lady's like, I there was no space for me at the hospital. It's like one person out of, they'd probably just moved her there to have a propaganda piece, that, this is getting out of hand.
Yeah. They did it in New York, Seattle, all over the place. They were empty. The hospitals never even, they didn't see people. I mean, but if you accurately and calmly point that out to somebody, they tell you that you're crazy.
Speaking of crazy, I'm looking right now that the U.S. starts off fiscal 2021 with the largest October budget deficit on record. So right now we're starting the fiscal year, which starts in October, with a $284 billion deficit for just the month of October. Now, when Obama left, it was $666 billion for the entire year. And it's crazy that Trump is literally going to get more. And I have it on video where I told it's like March of 2017. I got into an argument on air with this guy that was a big Trump supporter on his station. And I said, listen, over the course of 8 years, I bet Trump will have added more to the debt than Obama. And they were all laughing at me and what an idiot. And you can't honestly believe this. And matter of fact, I was wrong. He did it in one term. In one term, he added more or looks like he's going to add more to the debt in one term.
Currently the actual number, Tim, is 4.2 trillion. The official number is 3.18. So they're actually 1.1 trillion off in the calculation. And what's interesting here in Canada too, we're talking
about for 2020, the year to date.
Yeah, year to date. But what's interesting, Tim, is that we actually here in Canada too, we have a government debt number that gets released. And then you actually have an official debt number, which is, the actual the unofficial number. That's a real number. And it's like about, almost double of what the actual, number is that the government puts out. So all these numbers that people are looking at, like the CPI and all this inflation numbers, we could go into that and talk about how it's greatly manipulated and so on by these economists, because they don't want to show the massive weakness in the system that is happening right now. Because what we got to understand is the system with the currency system that we have today and that has been throughout history, and also government, they run on one thing and one thing only, and that is the trust in the system itself. When that trusting is broken, it's game over. For currency, it's under a year usually that it just falls into
and
nothing.
this actually kind of leads me into my next question, which is actually Jeffrey Wilson, which I'll give a shout out to Jeffrey Wilson from the Conspiracy Farm podcast, asks, if another lockdown goes down, what happens after that? And add that to the possible social unrest. I mean, do you think people are just going to take it, or do you think, at least half the country is probably going to be clamoring for this? Like, oh yeah, this is exactly what we need because Joe Biden told us to. But Charlie, what do you see the reaction of the the sheeple that are out there?
Man, I would love to say that the reaction is going to be a mass uprising, but it's not. I don't think it is. I wish it would be, but it won't be, because everybody's been so dumbed down and passive about this whole thing. Maybe if it's, to
but
us,
it's going to be pockets probably of insurrection, but yeah.
There'll be some people that see it and rise up, but they'll be challenged by the other people staying home. They'll say, how dare you get out there and riot about this or protest against this? How dare you get out there and become a super spreader or whatever, terminology. Yeah. So
nobody talked about that when Biden got all of his troops all over.
No. It's fine then. It's fine when you're protesting against in favor of Black Lives Matter. That's fine. The virus doesn't.
Or celebrate President-elect.
Yeah, when you celebrate president-elect, when the media calls it as president-elect and you celebrate it, that's totally fine. It's fine to eat dinner in a restaurant, but if you can't go into a bar because then the virus will kill you. The hypocrisy is staggering. It's everywhere. But do I think that the people are going to rise up and challenge it? Not enough. Not enough people, at least.
Well, I just stood up to it right now.
There you go.
Standing up to this.
Time to stand up.
Yeah, we also saw that, New York City, I think I just read now, is like a 10 p.m. curfew. So, the coronavirus, can only live, till 9:59. Yeah. Or it comes out at 10 o'clock. But, what other issues would you like to get into? I don't know if you want to talk about the book a little bit more and, pimp some ideas of why people should get the book or other things that they'll understand. And maybe they already get all this stuff. Maybe they've been listening to us for a while, or people that are like us, and maybe it's their friends or family that need to know how it's going down. What is this book? Who is this book good for? And I'll have it shown on screen while you're talking about this. Yeah,
it works for everybody. If you're somebody that has a grasp on these topics, we go into some pretty good detail on it, but it's not overly technical. So if it's new to you, if there's somebody in your life that doesn't have any idea about this, so somebody like you're talking about your grandpa who just finds this to be, unbelievable, the book will work to fill in a lot of the gaps, or it help to explain it to them in a way that I think makes sense, because part of what we do is we go into the history of empires, and people can sort of see what happened there, and that sets the tone for, okay, yes, this is what could happen. And then we lay out the argument, and once you get done reading it, you realize all those things that were the cause of the former empires coming apart are rampant in our current situation. And so you come to this realization that, oh no, we're on this same path as the rest of them. So it's not to say that this is all doom and gloom, because there will be opportunities in the aftermath of this to prosper, to maybe have a different reality. But what we're facing right now with currency problems, government, spending, and
except for Bitcoin, we're almost at 16,500 right now. So what's bad for the dollar and bad for the empire, is right now good for Bitcoin temporarily.
Yeah. And until this authoritarian government decides that Bitcoin is a threat to them, and then they start doing what
and then it probably goes up even more.
What Zimbabwe does, and say, punishable by death, right? They'll do that, something along those lines. So.
Which is funny, because one of the only actual punishments by death in the Constitution is debasing the money, which is what we first started talking about in the Roman Empire and the coin clipping. Yeah. And now you got
in modern history, it started with coin debasement, right? Like in the way of actually taking out lesser and lesser metals. All modern nations have actually done that right now, but now they're just debasing it. They've gone away from coinage almost completely now and just are printing currency, and that's the last stage of the debasement.
It sounds like you're playing with coins right now. Do you have like poker chips or something you're playing around with? I keep hearing like this like rattling that every now and then.
Me?
Yeah, I think it's coming from you. It sounds like there's some.
Oh, it's my damn laptop. It's like
okay. No, I think it's like when you're or it might be the microphone rubbing against the shirt. It sounds like some coins. I don't know. You're coin debasing right now as we speak. So. And also, what about the other book too? So people, we talked about the Controlled Demolition, which does have already 100. It's only been out for a couple weeks now. It's 138 5-star reviews on Amazon right now, as you guys can see that. So when you're dealing with the conspiracy crowd, it's a very tough crowd sometimes. It has very high standards. It's got a foreword written by Doug Casey, who I can actually lay claim to actually being the first person to ever get Doug Casey on a Zoom meeting, and I had to walk him and Ernest Hancock through how to use Zoom when I was interviewing both of them. So I can actually lay claim to that. Not that it really means anything. But what about the Doctrines of Global Control? What if is this a book they should read before the Controlled Demolition, or it doesn't really matter, or they're both kind of stand alone?
Well, they work well together. They are suggested together on Amazon as well. Besides Klaus
Schwab had to take it.
That's it. Well, that's a good one for like a broad overview of these topics. It gets into military control and governmental control and banking control and spiritual, scientific, media control. I mean, it just tackles a variety of topics. A lot of the stuff that we've been talking about now, but what makes that book different is the format that it's written in, where I brought in quotes from over 500 different people that had some sort of role or some sort of interesting opinion on some of the most important events in our history. And so you get you hear the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Clintons and Bushes talking about these things, but you also hear Joe Rogan and Bill Hicks and George Carlin and guys like that. So, I had added the comedians in, so it paints a different picture. But they work well together. I think you don't have to have one to understand the other, but if you read them both, it certainly, I feel like you'll certainly have a really good understanding about what's happening. And of course, like when Jeff and I were writing the book, when we started in 2018, the things that we were writing about, we were writing in the future tense. And then when we slammed the brakes on and went in had to wait for the Corona stuff to take place, when we went and infused that back throughout the book, we had to change a lot of the verb tense from past or from future tense to past tense, because it was like we were talking about how it was going to happen, and it had already happened in the meantime.
It's one of the reasons why I haven't written a book. Besides like the little booklet thing I've got that you guys, if you want to text the number down below, you'll also get on an emergency backup list, and it'll also explain how all these things are rigged, so that we don't need to figure out yourself. Yeah, but
Tim, it's important with those books, because I also did this kind of similar thing with my book. I said because I didn't know what was going to happen, but it was. History told me it was going to go away. I said, like, if you read this book, Venezuela has probably gone into a hyperinflation or deflation, devaluation event, and a couple other things in that book as well. But it's important, I think, what you've done, Charlie, and what I think what I tried to do with my book is making it readable in such a way that the general public actually could pick it up and understand what's going on. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to wake people up at all. And it's so important to, not overcomplicate the message and make it as simple as possible for people to then, go out and do their own research.
Yeah. And we also put actionable information. There's stuff that you need to know, stuff that if you know this, you can then make decisions in your life based on it. Like, as an example, when people put their money into their bank here in the United States, they're under the impression, well, that money's backed by the FDIC. And so, I can get it back. Well, that's true. If like the bank manager runs off to Tahiti with his secretary, right, and steals all the money out of the vault, the FDIC can step in and make you whole.
Back when you were allowed to run off to Tahiti or anywhere in the world.
Right.
Well, in a tiny credit, a small little bank.
Right, in a tiny one. But if it's a systemic issue, you're screwed. They don't have enough money to cover it. But on top of that, it's not even your money. Once you put it in the bank, it becomes the property of the banks. So the bank is in first position. And that is something that most people don't know. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until a couple of years ago. And it's like, wait, that can't be true. It's like, read the fine print in the contract when you open
they
your
changed that after 2008 that they made that adjustment, and they're always changing the rules. I mean, the Federal Reserve isn't supposed to. Well, they're not supposed to be doing basically anything that they're doing right now, or even existing. But I mean, starting to buy corporate bonds. I mean, investment grade bonds.
Well,
I mean, absolutely ridiculous.
And, here in Canada, Tim, and I wrote in my book, Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, ? I actually did find the numbers for the Canadian version of FDIC, the CDIC, and actually the numbers was 0.39% of all deposits under 100,000 Canadian dollars were covered in that fund. And what is more interesting is, since I've been selling probably like 4,000 or 5,000 copies of that book right now, suddenly you started to see just the last 2 years, the CDIC having constant commercials on network TVs, how secure your money is in the banks.
Yeah. Why would they be running those ads? Probably because the money is not secure and they want you to think that it is.
Yeah, same thing with the FDIC here. They're running. It's funny because they've got like nothing against like immigrants or people, but they have a lady like who like barely speaks English as like the head of the FDIC, like trying to assure people that their money's okay. And it's just like a very funny like optics, like just listening to it.
It's not okay.
Yeah.
Your money is not safe. It's their money. If you wake up, so we talk about a bank holiday and what that is. It's when you wake up and your bank is closed and you can't get your money out.
Speaking of which, Eric Schmidt is now moving to Cyprus, or now is getting Cyprus citizenship. So
and that's and we talk about Cyprus in the book as well.
Yeah, look how safe your money was there. Yeah,
it was gone. I mean, if you had over,
it's just a haircut, John.
And listen, like it wasn't small either. Like it was an average for the people under 100,000. It was 6.99%. For the people over 100,000 euros, it was 9.99. But what is more interesting was that there were people actually caught in the middle of this that lost tremendous amount of money. There was a lady that she was gonna she was retired. She was living in Cyprus. She was gonna move back to England. She got caught in the middle of a real estate transaction. Her money. She lost 50% over her money in Bank of Cyprus because it was just frozen and locked up there. She could never get it back, and she lost it. That was what she's going to go back to live on in England.
And the more insidious way to do that is to print a bunch of money and devalue it, which is the route America's taking. Yeah. But we're the world reserve currency, so we I say we because John's a Norwegian Canadian. So
but let me
this we discussion between Charlie and I. But,
right. but let me tell you about the story. So how that happens. I had a conversation. People don't believe it until they actually hear stories. So there's a story of a guy here in Winnipeg. He had moved from Argentina in 2001, but he told me two stories. He told me first the story of his dad, that suddenly in the 80s, he lost 75% overnight of all of his saved up money in Argentinian pesos during a devaluation. So suddenly he had 75% less money. So it was like basically you had 100,000. Now suddenly you had $25,000 like pesos worth of purchasing power at the end of it. Mm-hmm. Well, so he thought it was going to be smart. In 2001, there was another devaluation. Well, he'd positioned himself in US dollars in Citibank in Argentina. Problem was that when you're in the country, that bank is not an American bank. It's a chartered bank with an American name. And so what they did is they took the US dollars, put it in Argentinian pesos, and then devalued it. So they're not safe when they're in the banking system at all. You got to, at least if you do that, you got to go to a bank outside of your country and not within your country, because a lot of people thought that, I'm putting it in US dollars in a bank account. Well, now it's safe. No, it was not. And so, there's those risks. And those stories are very important to tell people, because if you don't tell those because this is individual stories told by people that are affected. And when you tell those stories, they become pretty real when it's actually physical people that I talked to that have had this experience.
Yeah, but I do want to say, we definitely appreciate having Charlie on the show today. It's he's been on. It's the second time he's been on the show, and you guys can find more information about Charlie by going to his website, which we're going to put on screen right now, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com, and there you can find his book, The Octopus of Global Control. I'm sure you can also find, or go to Amazon and type in The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. That's a book that you co-wrote with Jeff Berwick, and definitely want to support Charlie. And it's it's a great book to give people who are just now starting to get into this stuff. Even probably great for people who know a little bit more about this. But and Charlie also is the host of the Macro Aggression podcast. I was just on it recently.
Yep.
Jeff Berwick was
John's
on
been on it
before me. John was on it a while ago, and yeah. So how many episodes do you have out now? And it's relatively
72 episodes.
Oh, wow.
I put 2 out. Yeah, 2 out a week. One monologue and one interview. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and people can check that out on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and David Icke's video platform called Iconic.
Very, very nice. And then with John, we got all of his information can be found at theeconomictruth.org, where you guys can get the books that he was referencing that I've got up on screen right now. Also, he's got a lot of economic reports, and you can hire him as an economic advisor, especially if you've got questions on Canada. That would be a good thing to do. And then, of course, I don't have my own stuff ready to be on screen, but if you go to thelibertyadvisor.com, it's all the financial planning stuff. I actually did just update it recently with a few new videos and things for you guys. And if you go to the Liberty Advisor show, that's where you can find all the media. Because if you're watching this on YouTube, just don't bank on us being there forever. I know we were bitching about this on World Alternative Media, and then they did kick us off. So we're not just saying this just to say it. And Flote right now, it has actually we're getting quite a bit of traffic over there. I mean, for being a brand new platform, actually definitely a decent amount. So check that out. Check out the podcast, and that way, if it's in the podcast feed, pretty much any one of the main ones you guys listen to. But the best thing to do, you can also on John's website, you can go. I need to get this up on mine right now, but let me show you guys here. Right in the very front, you can sign up for the newsletter. And what we'll do is we're going to start, pretty soon here, sending out emails as, sort of like what Jeff does, a lot of other people do, letting people know, hey, there's a new show, this is what it was about, and you can check it out because, I do suspect that they're not always going to be giving out this information. And on Facebook, I cut the stream after half an hour because I think I shared it out to a bunch of different groups, and in the aggregate, probably shared it out to like 100,000 people, and yet we had, one person watching. So, that obviously goes to show you, what's going on Facebook. On my channel that has over 30,000 people on it, we had literally 0 people on there watching it. Probably didn't even reach anybody. It's just all a joke, but it's always great hanging with Charlie. It's always great hanging with John, obviously, or else I wouldn't be doing a show with him, twice a week. And we do have some great shows coming up for you. We got one with Jim Cantrell, who's the co-founder of SpaceX, agreed to do a show next week, so we've got that one coming up. We've got Richard Grove, who's just like a guy knows everything about everything when it comes to conspiracies and how everything. I mean, this guy is not that Charlie doesn't know everything too, but Richard Grove is just
he's got it. He's got it dialed in.
Level.
Richard Grove knows his stuff.
And I don't really say that's not really honor that I really bestow upon a lot of people, but I mean he's coming on. We've got Peter Kines. We got a lot of good hard hitters coming up soon. So appreciate you guys' support. Appreciate you guys checking in. Appreciate you guys hitting the like button. If you're new here, please subscribe. But anyways, thank you so much for hanging, and I'll talk to you guys later. It's another great Tim and John show.